the area. We're really excited to have Phil Memmer, who is the editor of Stone Canoe, here with us tonight, and some contributors, which includes 3 current or former Wells English faculty, and Phil and Donna are gonna share some poetry and nonfiction with us tonight. I'm Dan Rosenberg. I direct the Visiting Writer Series. I like to say that even though I definitely know every single one of you in here. Hi.
Nice to meet you. Hi.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dan.
Welcome.
How's that British poetry class treating you?
Fabulous.
That's the only answer that we accept. So, good. So, Stone Canoe, this is the 10th issue, and it is beautiful. It's gone through a transition. I guess last year, it sort of found a new home with the Syracuse Y, and found itself in Phil's capable hands. And you can see that it's just a beautiful document that is available for purchase today for the low price of...
For students, $12.
$12 for students. Your life is great. And so Phil's going to be our MC tonight. I just wanted to take that brief moment to welcome you all to the event. And so now I'll turn it over to Phil.
Thanks, Dan. I'm not doing much better than Dan is voice-wise, so I'm going to do the best I can, but I'm sure I'll be hacking and wheezing later in the evening. Stone Canoe has been going for 10 years, and but just the last year at the Y. It was formerly published by University College at Syracuse University, and it has something that's a rather unique mission for a literary journal, which is that it only prints work by writers and visual artists who are current or former residents of upstate New York. Upstate defined rather loosely in this instance as anything not New York City or Long Island. So, folks in the North Country would quibble with our definition of it, but we're too busy to police people's zip codes and figure out exactly where they are. But the idea to draw attention to the amazing and diverse literary landscape that is the rest of New York State, the part of the state that many in our country forget even exists. It was cut from the university's budget after the 8th issue. Last year, Bob produced it mostly on his own. We stepped in to help with the business side of it a little way into production. And then this issue was the first produced by the Downtown Writers Center at the Syracuse YMCA. So we're a community literary arts center up in Syracuse, so just roughly an hour from here. Not a bad drive at all. And we host around 25 readings a year, poetry and fiction, occasionally nonfiction. So if you're ever in the mood to road trip, I know Dan probably has our brochure on his door or nearby, so you can see the series, and we're online as well. A lot of great stuff. And Stone Canoe has always had a strong ally in Wells. Bruce was the poetry editor for issue number 9 and has been a frequent contributor over the years. But Stone Canoe also has hosted many events like this tonight here at the college over the years. So glad to be back. I was telling someone earlier, I've been to Wells probably a dozen times for one thing or another at this point, and I've never seen a raindrop, I've never seen a snowflake. It's just every time I come, it's gorgeous and beautiful. And it's 20 degrees warmer here than it is in Syracuse somehow today. I don't know what's going on, but it's another fantastic day at Wells. So delighted to be here. I'm going to start off. I'm going to introduce each of our writers, but I'm also in between going to read a piece by a poet who isn't here tonight, just to add a little bit more to the evening. And I was going to try to read a story, but I know with my voice trying to go on me here, I'm not going to get through a piece of fiction. But I'm going to start off with a poem by a wonderful poet named Dan Donaghy, who went to school at Cornell for undergrad and currently lives in Connecticut. It's called Bank Day. One Saturday morning a month, my mother and I strolled Kensington Avenue to the bank, strolled the way you could that shadowed the street then, our shoulders almost touching, my passbook and envelope of found change clicked into her purse, while the L clattered overhead and shops raised their gates to the day, Dennery Sports wheeling out racks of shorts and shirts on sale, Phil's appliances lining the curb with used stoves. Then the pool hall's dark, Kellis bar's neon glow, the laundromat's early rumble and hum, the refrigerated cold of Heine's Deli pouring out its doors and over us as we passed its stacks of the Bulletin and Daily News and hungry third shifters waiting on hoagies and cheese fries at Bill Steak's takeout window. I was 13. It was almost a year since my father drove off. My mother could have used that change, no doubt, but never said so during our 2-mile walks or any time before or after, her perm aqua-netted into place. No sign in her husky blue eyes that my father's checks every other week weren't enough, and that she'd signed up for food stamps. No sign of anything wrong at all as she smiled at bargains in the storefront windows of Levin's Furniture and Kresge's 5 and Dime, as she pulled me inside Humphrey's Drugs for samples of their homemade sweets. Fudge, nonpareils, salted pecans, sticky saltwater taffy, dipped strawberries and raisins, and crunchy malt balls melting in our hands and our mouths, leaving a rim of chocolate around our lips that we'd slyly lick away as we stepped back into slatted light and continued on, past Lost Love crying from the record spot, past Four Sons Pizza, where soon floured dough would fly round as manhole covers, and our wax water cups would sweat inside our fingers when we stopped for an early lunch and a slice of the best Sicilian around, crust thicker than our thumbs, mounds of mozzarella drowned in red sauce rich with garlic and chopped basil, topped with a pinch of pecorino. First, though, we had to cross Allegheny's 5-way spiderweb, had to climb the stained marble steps beneath the old clock that told every hour back when the block was thick with mills, factories, and trolley traffic, that sat silent above us while I waited in a winding line after I'd raised the black pen on its beaded chain and written my account number and my name. After I'd counted that change and my mother double-checked it, then took a seat beside a fake fern under a big arched window, crossing her blue-veined calves, waving at me to go on like she would again at the end of her life. So I went on, went up to the handsome man who offered a lollipop I thought myself too old for, who fed my coins into a counter and marked my book in purple ink, pointing out pennies of interest I'd made since last time, saying, "Keep up the good work," loud enough for my mother to hear. So, Dan Donaghy. I'm going to turn things over to someone you may not know. He is a poet named Dan Rosenberg. Dan.
Thanks. That's yeah. Hi. It's been so long. I'm gonna read one thing of that's really of mine because I feel like all I do is read here. But then I'm gonna read some things from this book of translations that I did from the tremendous Slovenian poet Miklas Komnev, and this is the newest book that I published. I'm not gonna publish another book for like a decade, so you'll not hear me reading from books of mine anymore, but this poem is actually on this amazing broadside that Rich Kegler did with an assist from Ryan Elsenbeck. It's a do-si-do broadside, so this way my poem's right side up, this way Becca's poem's right side up. Colophon's on the bottom. And they're both sort of poems to or about miles our sun, and the block shapes are like letter forms. Had they been put in the right order, they could have made letters, but they're not in the right order, and the whole thing is as disoriented as we usually are. So we think this is really great and exciting and beautiful, and there are copies here available tonight for the low, low price of $10 for the Book Art Center. Later on, they will be available online for $20. So.
And we can get Miles to sign them.
And Miles will sign them.
Seriously, I can make that happen.
Yes, in crayon or peas. He will use either medium. So it's an amazing thing. You should come and check it out. But I will read the poem that's in Stone Canoe. Right now it's called, and it's on the broadside, To Miles, January 2015. You burnish my residue, little man, partially formed and incapable of lying. When I think I can't be chewed anymore, you're on my arm, head whipping like a kill shake, a deranged and gummy harmonica solo. Concave mirror, dirty bundle of need, but I am full as the world of need for you, full as fire. You wear me to the wick and I keep dancing. For you, I turn the record, snap the straps, harness you to my chest. I groove my path around the room for you. I strengthen my back and bear and bear. So that's that, and then I'll just read a couple of quick poems by Miklaush that are in English translation by me and Boris Grigorich, my co-translator. And I want to start with this one because he wrote this when his first child, his daughter, was born. And it has no title. I picture the world as sutures, as wounds knitting, as skull bones knitting together. You are born into the world without a world, with all the layers of a world that isn't there. No impassibility, no walking, no impassibility. How can you bear your distant past being closer than the most recent moment? Our distant past doesn't reach back as far as your most recent moment. With all that, a glance at the tenements becomes a performance of some thrilling antiquity, as full and fast as ancient temples, and surrounds it with the thrill of peoples rising and falling. So this one was the biggest translation challenge in the book because it's an anagrammatic poem. He took the title, and he just repeated it, I want to say 7 times, and then used all and only those letters to create the poem. So how do you translate that? One option is to duplicate that process, but that felt like that would be a performance of like my facility with English instead of like an effort at communicating what he had ended up doing. So we went for something that was tonally capturing the musicality of the original. I'll read you the original just so you can hear it, and then I'll read you our translation. Netapir noche mochati, cho noche te poti, noche, ochi peche talina turn, lumpen pacine mocello, in motor tone, ochita, robota, tokota, tonech toche, mir, in chonich noche telepote, nicha, mir, netopir, noche mochati. The bat won't shut its trap. The boat don't like that tack. The night, that porthole hurts the eyes, a thorn, foam breaks, makes a face on a silent forehead, and the motor sinks, grumbles, rattles, clatters, sinks and cracks. Peace. And the baby boat don't want that trifling beauty. Peace, peace, that I won't shut my trap. Yeah. I'll just do maybe a couple more. This one, translation issues, it's a very, very short poem. In that bright light, the deterioration of human objects is the only thing that gives them their purity, their human purity. And purity is not the right word. The Slovene word should be translated as like untouchedness. But it sounds so labored and awkward in English, but we don't have a word for the, like a thing that has the property, or not even the thing, but the property of not having been touched. So purity felt like as close as we could get there. It's a fascinating, he's a fascinating writer. This one, many of you have been in classes where we've read ekphrastic poems looking at Bruegel's landscape with the fall of Icarus. This is speaking to that same myth. When Daedalus, half dead, half bird, landed on the other side of the murderous sea, on the hill with Apollo's temple, he inadvertently saw, when he bent over at the doorstep, looking back to the sea, before he shook off his tingling feathers, before his voice returned, with which he called to his dead son, deeply below him, on the empty shoreline, a man and a horse. Maybe I'll end with this one, which is one of my favorites, from also untitled. A snowflake falls on a forehead which changes into the white-hot side of a stove. In the black, gray, and white colors of the ash, I can't find the color that has burned away. The dark and distant interior of the body, shaken by the bonds of red and blood. Awesome, thank you.
Broadside is fantastic. I'm gonna read one here by a poet named Vince Gotera. He actually, he read for us at the Y last Friday. He lives in the Midwest and edits a very famous journal called the North American Review. But his girlfriend lives in Binghamton, so he's back and forth quite a bit. And I missed his reading because I was sick. But I'll make it up to myself now by reading this one called Soldier's Son. I can smell the beer on his breath, my father crouching next to my bed, midnight, dark. I'm 10. I can hear my mother brushing her teeth. Just now, Indian head test pattern in their bedroom after Steve Allen, oh say can you see, station sign off. Papa strokes my hair with his right hand, the hand of a combat engineer who blew up bridges rather than built them, commando dynamite, hand inflamed to fuse. The hand whose calloused index finger betrayed him as a soldier in the days after General Wainwright's surrender. The hand that broke the neck of a traitor in the Japanese concentration camp. This hand gentle on my head, he whispers, I love you, Vin. I keep my eyes closed tight, hard, continue to pretend I'm asleep. If he sees I'm awake, he might stop. The one and only time he said it might stop. So, Vince Gotera. Next up, we're going to hear from Rebecca Myers. Rebecca.
Thank you so much for publishing me in Stone Canoe. I love this journal. I can't wait to dive in and read all the work. I've been writing mostly poems and nonfiction about motherhood, go figure, this year and a half. So I'll open with the poem that I wrote that's published in Stone Canoe, and then I'm going to do some creative nonfiction about motherhood as well. The poem is called Song for Distance. I push the stroller up the hill, and each square of sidewalk marks a year into your future, the good exertion of it. Miles above sea level, a medium dangles her arm out a car window. The wind takes her bracelet. On the ride back, she'll ask the dead to tell her the exact ditch into which it fell. She'll yell, pull over, point. I also beg direction of what's behind me. How much do I love you? This much, I say, arms outstretched in a yoga pose I named sleep-deprived air traffic controller. I'll never get the map refolded right. Ditto for assembling your furniture. For now, I set you in a pen, but muffin, I'm shucking the oyster as best I know how. You rouse all hours, rocket like the possessed, clap hands or collapse into tabletop on autopilot. I look both ways before I cross. I'm just now noticing the tops of things. Every day is a day I can return to. The creative nonfiction I'm going to read is a much longer piece. It's like 4,000 words, but I'm only going to do sections of it. So hopefully the sections I pick will give you a sense of the longer narrative. I could tell you how a stranded Robert Bartlett walked 700 miles across an iced-over Chukchi Sea, how Robert Burke traversed the latitude of Australia but died from exhaustion after turning back from a mountain called Hopeless. I could hold court on malaria and capsize. I could list disappearances. I mitigated anxiety by reading about explorers on Wikipedia, their failed attempts at discovery, their terrific demises. This wasn't an exercise in schadenfreude. I took no pleasure in frostbite and swells. I called up extreme scenarios the way a surgeon might review dark particulars before entering the operating room. I received the past as a safeguard, as if empathy could preclude the unknown. I lingered longest on those who loved the most distance. There were very few female deaths to parse because there are very few female explorers. I reinterpreted phrases like new land of the codfish, which suddenly described my pregnant body. Toward the end of my first trimester, I heard a story on NPR about Louis Armstrong, how as a street performer he would tuck pennies into his mouth to prevent other musicians from stealing from him. My earliest sign of pregnancy had always been a metallic taste in the back of my throat. I wanted to stash our son inside me forever, keep him out of circulation. I imagined safeguarding him, my own private treasure, settling for a life of ghostly kicks to avoid a grisly, protracted birth scene, or even worse, loss. I began swimming 3 times a week at the start of my second trimester because of something I'd read about the movements in freestyle creating a streamlined birth canal, a luge tube the baby could simply slide down. I conceived of myself as a smooth centaur. No one knew I was carrying a child when I was in the pool. My hindquarters were hidden. Whenever I eased into the water, acclimating to the chill, I thought of Peter Artedi, the naturalist credited with fathering fish science. I had learned of him accidentally, a detour in my cataloging the bad luck of explorers. He drowned in an Amsterdam canal after a night of heavy drinking. He had spent his whole life studying aquatic depths, the minutiae of structure, but no amount of studying could have prepared him for what it felt like to go under that way. We moved across town on my 37th birthday, also the beginning of my 3rd trimester. Our 600 square foot 1-bedroom wouldn't have accommodated our expanding family. The Georgia heat was indefensible, and I was far too big to be of any real help. I offered to scrub the baseboards of our old house, but mostly I just sat and ran a cloth over the same spot, my hair in a do-rag, pretending to be a Victorian washerwoman. I cursed at Dan in a trussed-up Cockney accent and called him my costermonger, a word I'd only just learned from BBC drama. It means someone who sells fruits and vegetables in the market, but I was using it to refer to a husband who was making me pack and unpack all of our worldly belongings when I was being sucker punched from the inside. And then, just as we'd finished unwrapping the bubble tape from all our breakables, just as we'd mopped the floor with organic baby-friendly cleaner, Dan got the call that he was one of 3 final candidates being considered for a tenure-track job teaching in upstate New York. The college was requesting he fly out for an interview that week. I was suddenly faced with the prospect of moving again, this time 2,000 miles at 37 weeks pregnant. I looked to our 2 cats. We would have to do the trip by car, for their sake and for mine. I was too pregnant to fly. The cats sniffed at the familiar couch like it was a stranger. While Dan was away interviewing, I spent every afternoon underwater. I was in the locker room massaging mango-scented stretch mark cream into my expanding belly when he called to let me know he was offered the job. I watched as my naked reflection in the mirror answered the phone, watched as my mouth gaped at the shock of the news. I was starring in an avant-garde theater production with no costuming budget. That night, we discussed the pros and cons, as adults do, doodling half lists on a napkin. Cons, leaving our support system of friends, my parents nearby in North Carolina, and a trusted team of midwives. Pros, greater financial security, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I agreed to move to a strange town in the country, sight unseen, under one condition, a visit to Hershey Park. We joked that this concession sounded more like a concession stand, as in candy, as in sweet. It was late July in the South when we embarked on the long journey north. At a rest stop along I-95, I attempted some light yoga on the grass and decided it would be easier to give up and live there, next to a picnic table, walking distance from not 1 but 2 vending machines. On my back, with my arms outstretched at odd angles, I looked like a broken sundial, measuring distance, not time. At Hershey Park, I slogged from one chocolate room to another. Crowds parted. I cradled a mountain of crackle bars in my arms, then abruptly decided to buy none. A waitress at Denny's mistakenly wrote pain cakes on our check. I repeated, I will consume rather than be consumed by contractions. I will consume rather than be consumed by fear. I'll leave out the birth part. Okay. As painful as labor was in the moment, its end would usher in an analgetic forgetting. In the immediate aftermath of birth, as soon as my squalling son had been placed on my chest and had listed successfully onto my right nipple, I felt capable of anything. Eating the entire 3-tiered pastrami sandwich I demanded my father-in-law bring me in the delivery room, for example, or walking unassisted into the recovery suite. At 4 a.m., guided by endorphins, I rose out of my adjustable bed to unpack and correct some bad birthing center feng shui by moving a lamp and draping a receiving blanket over a tray table. I must do it all, I thought to myself, and I wasn't even sure what it was. I had the bravado of an explorer, one with the unfounded confidence and determination to press on, westward, regardless of poor conditions. I was thinking specifically of Henry Hudson, who, after spending the winter of 1611 cooped up with a starving crew in ice, still insisted on setting sail for the Northwest Passage as soon as the ice cleared. Like Hudson, I also wanted to keep going. I was at the helm of my own discovery, deluded in spirit, unable to acknowledge a torn perineum and a low iron count. But Henry Hudson's men mutinied against him. They put Hudson, a few loyal crew members, and his son in an open boat, then set a course for England. Our journal indicates that Hudson oared feverishly to keep up with the ship, whose sails were unfurled to garner maximum speed. He couldn't. This was me, repentant of my boundless stamina, claustrophobic in the wake of the world, alone in strange waters with my son. I kept sounding out his name to the clock on the wall. It felt apt. Miles, how far I was from the person I had been. My love for Miles is an unfamiliar love, a contradictory love. It simultaneously multiplies and tethers me. I anticipate his waking a split second before he wakes. I startle and touch Dan's face in bed next to me, expecting anything warm to be him, a vulnerable bundle of need. When I nurse, I am being drawn down into the earth, stabilized, but also released of some weight that has held me back my whole life. Sometimes at night, I play a sinister game of questioning. Would you die for your son by train, by axe, by wheel, by sandstorm, by stonefish? The answer is yes, always unflinchingly yes. Miles and Dan and I live in unmapped wilderness in a geothermal house with a view of a lake in a small rural upstate town. If pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding, then joy is a walling off. A family of 10 deer comes to feed in our yard every dusk. I count them out loud to our son. 1 deer for each centimeter I was dilated, a distant memory of pain, of distance itself. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm going to read one now by Meg Carney, who I believe has read here at Wells several times over the years. This is called Barn Swallows Truck Mud. Bird shit will strip paint off a truck as sure as your ex cleaned you out of near everything you owned. So as swallows circle and swoop round rafters overhead, their colony of nests sweating mud in the half-dark, you spread a tarp over the cab. Coked up birds, you think, then cops covered his body, his face like this. More birds sweep out the barn door and soon are back, feasting on flies that still haunt the empty horse stalls. Before you cover the cap, you peer through its glass. They're there, rolled up mat, sleeping bag that formed your bed after how many midnight escapes? Don't count. Once he stole those too, along with your shoes, but after a 70-hour high, he passed out and you stole them back, then disappeared for days. That was an art you shared, but he finally perfected. When they buried him, it rained so hard the ground seemed to suck him under. It was mud tried to steal your shoes then, while the preacher told of Christ as a boy molding mud into swallows that up and flew away. So, Meg Carney, wonderful poet. Next up, we're going to hear from one of our nonfiction contributors, Donna Marsh from Syracuse.
Thank you. This piece is also from a longer essay that I'm going to excerpt. It's from a book titled Reaching for the Pearl. This is the title essay. And I always say it's my attempt to bring my daughter back to life, if only on the page. So I do want to thank Phil and all of the people from Stone Canoe for giving Vanessa a home on the page. I wake up to a crystal clear morning, the sun slicing sharply across my bedroom, a dagger of light. As I do every morning, I turn to reach for Lando's golden tan body. The warmth of a dog is grounding. No mysteries in what he brings to the life and fewer responsibilities. At least those he requires I am just as in need of as he. As I do every morning now when I wake up, I take mental inventory. I have 2 sons, 1 husband, 1 dog. They are safe. I have a daughter, but only in memory. Because on one day, 13 years ago, she was not safe. I shake off my sleep. I had a dream. I am intrigued with the subject, and I replay it slowly. In the dream, I am lying somewhere, supine. There is a brown pearl ring dangling just beyond my grasp. Its nacre produces a desire to grip correctly, to get the right purchase so that I can pull it toward me. But I just cannot reach. And I wake up with my arm outstretched, still reaching for the pearl. The last day my daughter, my only daughter, my baby girl, was not safe, may have been the last in a string of such days. I only know that on 9/11/2001, Vanessa believed for a time she was safe because that is what she told her colleagues who worked in the Park Avenue office of Regis Business International. She worked for Regis on the 93rd floor of the World Trade Center. She sat at her desk on the 93rd floor of Tower 2 at least 5 minutes after the first plane hit Tower 1. She explained that she and others in that tower were told by authority they were safe. Vanessa trusted in those words as she did in my own words many, many times, as if in the folds they held her best interests. I don't know exactly how long before she got it. Did she ever? Did she ever suspect until it was way too late, way beyond any help I could offer or any prayers a mother could utter? Did she really for 1 second believe that it was all over for our lives together here on earth? Why did I ever, for 1 single moment, think I could be a decent enough mother to a baby girl? Me, with no legitimacy that comes from family, both my mother and father criminals. Why did I ever think I could be better than my own parents? I am afraid of pearls now, though I wasn't always. Even when my best friend Rhoda's sister died, and her mom Eva gave Vanessa, an infant at the time, Tony's pearl ring, I never feared them. I was 18 when Eva handed me the ring. I want Vanessa to have something of Tony's. There were, too, the nights when I could not breathe. In those days when Vanessa and I lived alone, the asthma would come with little warning. I could breathe, and then I couldn't. Often on those nights, the lifeguard would stay until I was taken to the ER. The lifeguard is my husband, whose name I cannot say. One night, one precarious little, it could go either way night, after the attack had subsided, I lay in bed with the television on, the aminophylline emptying me of physical energy, but my brain still abuzz. My phone rang. It was 4:16 a.m. I picked up the receiver, a sharp voice, a woman's voice. Go to bed, you fucking slut. I want to sleep. After that night, the calls continued. Turn off the television, turn off the music, the banging on my floor from downstairs at all hours of the day and night. When she called, it was always to call me a whore, a slut, a tramp. She knew my ex-husband's family. She wanted quiet. I had hardwood floors. Later that week, as Vanessa and I were getting out of the car after a shopping trip, grabbing packages before we crossed the street, she appeared with her husband on her arm, he trying to pull her back to him, Mrs. Ventolito, the woman who made me small and dirty. She had brown red hair, weathered skin, and pink lipstick that bled onto her teeth. Why don't you move, you fucking bitch? Then louder, you fucking bitch. Vanessa and I were frozen right there in place. If the exterior of our suburban home was a mess I could not control, I made sure that the interior was mine. No suburban tchotchkes, only muted colors that rhymed with the nature I needed, clean and warm. No clothes thrown all over, no dirt. If outside was a screwed up mess of whatever the suburbs were designed not to be, inside was a cityscaped haven of calm and urbane life. Only Vanessa's room was still wild chaos, every drawer open and spilling its contents, every piece of paper in her life somewhere in the mix, the bottles of cosmetics mixed with her best jewelry in pink and purple plastic tubs. I had long since stopped trying to order the space. I simply closed the door. On one of those days when I realized how fleeting our love and how pervasive our anger, I was overcome with guilt and love and sympathy for what it must have been like to have me, her mother, so determined to order. I had the impulse to take her into my arms. She was wearing a top that was mine, a cotton stripe that reminded me of how she smelled as a child. I saw that she was wearing Tony's pearl ring. It was rare. Her fingers were long and elegant like my own, but she had her father's nail beds. I always worried about what else she might have taken from him, his wild love for heroin, his epilepsy, his status in his own family as persona non grata in the midst of powerfully overachieving brothers. When I grabbed her, it was almost too quick, as if I were going to attack her rather than embrace. I had to do it quickly before I couldn't, and it surprised her. Then she relaxed, gave in. We were both awkward, as her head bent toward me, and that long, wild mane of curls coated with her products, herbal essence, shampoo, hair mousse, and whatever perfume found its way to her hair, wound up in my mouth, the taste of it fruity and bitter mingling with the woolly texture, made me almost gag. We pushed away. She said, "I love you, Mom." I let my response go unuttered. My father never could express his love for us once we were beyond childhood. His voice would crack when he tried, and I don't think he ever wanted to be so vulnerable. My mother always told us she loved us. I always thought that was cheap and gratuitous. Be careful what you resist. You leave room for something else to grow. I was in the crib, and yet this memory is one of the clearest of my life. It was afternoon. I felt agitated. The blinds were closed. My mother closed them and left the room. I saw the light through the small holes where the threads held imperfectly. It was unjust. It was day, and I was awake and alert and alive. She wanted me to give in, to sleep. She was in the other room roaming freely. I could not bear the confinement. Though much would happen later in my life that made our relationship taut, nothing would ever be as concrete as this betrayal. She imprisoned me. My tears made me sticky, and the stickiness made me more angry. It was hot. She closed the blinds to tell me it was dark. They lie. Parents lie. It is encoded in the role. This relationship was predicated on something other than our laughing and our love. I stood holding the rail. I screamed. I jumped. I was not so much tired as I was tiring, not from nature, from anger. I would not let her win. I would not lie down. My bottle of warm milk was with me. I knew its taste, and that if only I sipped it, I would feel better, but I would not drink it. I would not lie down. For my mother, the daughter was exhausting. For me as well. I always wonder if I were not the kind of person for whom every daunted desire was so lingering, Would I have been a better mother? When I found I was pregnant with Vanessa, there was no clear blue, easy, or any other form or color of clarity, never mind ease, test kit that told. There was a humiliating trip to Dr. Friedman, a man who had treated each and every one of my family members for every daily ailment since my grandmother found him in the 50s. He was a neat man who had the habit of cupping his hands together when delivering any kind of diagnosis. When he examined me, his hands were cold. After he pulled a sheet over me, looked at my mother and my grandmother and told them she may be, not daring to say what I may have been. She is certainly no longer a virgin. He cleared his throat, sent me to a lab on the Grand Concourse near Fordham Road. I waited 2 days to find a rabbit had not survived the test. The road for my mother was clear. There was simply no choice. With no resources, there was only abortion. Choice. A woman has a right to her own body. But what of the girl? In the days following 9/11, my son-in-law Tim had given up hope that we would ever find or have returned Vanessa's body, and I don't remember now whether I had. It was the first weekend in January of '02, and I had gone out grocery shopping on Sunday afternoon into evening. It was cold out, though no fresh snow had fallen, and that meant it was also dark and vacant. As I was leaving with my goods, I noticed the headline in a newspaper from the news bins that lined the front of the market. There had been 4 months after the fall of the towers, a group of firefighters' bodies found in the rubble. I left thinking they had found her because surely, if Vanessa was anywhere on earth, she was with a group of firemen. They in their roles to save, and she in hers to live. As I drove home, I felt something as if it were a touch, an idea. They are touching her. Vanessa's body's being handled. She's found. I was as certain about that as I was that it was January. I called Tim. He answered quickly, first ring. Hey, Donna, what's up? Tim, did they call you? Who? But he knew what I was asking. It was our refrain. He didn't want to disappoint me again. I don't know, the police, Clinton's office? Why would they call? His tone now impatient, surrounded by other voices in the background. They're touching her. They found, his voice sharp and measured. They are not going to find her. They found firemen, Timmy. She was with them. She's dust, he broke in, and then fell silent. I did too. The voices in the background stopped. He continued, she's vapor. Let her go. It's over. She's gone, and it makes no difference, no matter. He paused. No mas. The next morning, the phone jangled. Tim, how the fuck did you know? Know what? He choked. A laugh, a sob. They found her. She's at the morgue. We can pick up her body when we're ready, and her property. There is a ring in a blue glass box that my sister bought for me in Blue Mountain Lake. It is a pearl ring in a gold floral setting with DMORT tags. One says FTNY, the other NYPD, and the number deboxed. The box is in a cabinet in Vanessa's wedding cake topper, alongside her New York Giants beanie baby. It is in the room Vanessa and Tim claimed as their own in the house where we moved just before Vanessa's 27th birthday, about a half a mile as the crow flies from the house on Gobbler, but a world away in all other matters of travel. I hold her property, matter without life. Her life in these few trinkets still here implies all the rest of what she was, the artifacts of history, a daughter. I still hear her first cry, and I wonder, did she, as did I, every moment of my life spent in fear, cry out for my mommy? Of course she did, and I was not there. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you.
As Donna mentioned, that's a much longer piece that she was excerpting from, and it is really lovely. So check it out. This is by a poet named George Drew. Is George Drew on this?
Yes.
He did. Called Listening to Country on the Tarmac at O'Hare. Uplift. That's what melodic lamentations in the key of C are meant to provide, but nothing doing for an hour and a half, our wings clipped before they even open. Heartbroken, lonesome cowboys soldier on, their twangs valedictorians of desire, orators of the down and out lovesick, or sizzling like mama's griddle, the one I'm listening to no different than any other, just a down-home honky-tonk troubadour hunk, making like Merle and Buck and George, here on the rain-riddled tarmac at O'Hare. Most of the songs about Mary or Sue or Molly, about love lost or love regained or love never won. Love lost in time and over time, who sings what beside the point. Like the rider thrown by a bull, no one remembers him, only the bull. Uplift, grunts, bucks, snorts. We're going to close things down with Bruce Bennett. Bruce.
Thank you. I'm glad people came, and I'm glad, thank you, Dan, for continuing the tradition of Stone Canoe. I think some people here probably have been at other Stone Canoe readings, which we've actually had every year for many years in a row. And one of the things that I greatly admire about the magazine, in some ways it's more than just a literary magazine. It publishes art, it publishes all the genre of literature. It has a lot of outreach. It has a lot of social conscience and commitment. For example, it has its own veterans awards. It has prison writing. It has social services in the Syracuse area. And it really occupies a place. I mean, it's a major literary journal, but it also occupies a special place. And I'm so glad it's under now the Y and Phil's leadership. So I wanted, I had a poem in it, and I wasn't sure what we would be reading tonight. It's hard to read after Donna's incredibly powerful work. Some of my poems are dark, but they're not dark like Donna's work. I came to Dan's Maker's Craft course earlier, and we were talking about form, and I was talking mainly about villanelles. There are a number of different kinds of formal poetry, and what I've tried to do is use forms in a way that sometimes tell a story or sometimes just almost work like music in terms of a refrain. And the poem that appears in Stone Canoe and everything, all but one poem I'll be reading are very local. Stone Canoe is a place where place is honored. But this is a poem sort of about Aurora and sort of about a mythical Aurora. And Donna, you said you've never been to Aurora. Come visit again sometime. This is called Just Another Day in Just Our Town. And it's in the form of a triolet. A triolet is an 8-stanza poem where the first and second lines are repeated again at the end as the 7th and 8th. There are only 2 rhymes, and the 4th line is the same as the first line. I won't go into more detail, but it doesn't make too much forward progress, if you can imagine. It's only 8 lines, and most of those are repeated. What I've done is write triolets that are linked, so they're not just the 8 lines, they keep going for a while. The way a lot of the limericks in the contest last week that Professor Clugston officiated at, a lot of the limericks are also linked. So this is called Just Another Day in Just Our Town. The people who are going to die have died. The town has mourned them in the proper way. Their time has passed, Now time has passed them by. The people who were going to die have died. We think of them, their memories abide. There really isn't very much to say. The people who are going to die have died. The town has mourned them in the proper way. The people who have yet to die are here. They go about their business unperturbed. Their duties and their consciences are clear. The people who have yet to die are here, and do not think they too will disappear. They are not troubled, anxious, or disturbed. The people who have yet to die are here. They go about their business unperturbed. It's just another day in just our town. We mind what little business that we have. Some children play, and some of them are grown. It's just another day in just our town. We say hello, but everyone's unknown. We save whatever time we have to save. It's just another day in just our town. We mind what little business that we have. The people who were going to die have died. The people who have yet to die are here. Their time is passing. Time will pass them by. The people who are going to die have died. Their time has passed. Their memories abide. The day will come when all will disappear. The people who are going to die will die. The people who are here will not be here. So, not too cheerful. The second is also linked triolet. Kind of tells a story, and it raises a question that we talk about a lot in classes and think about when we're reading literature and in our own lives. Are we responsible for our lives? Have we made the choices that then result in the lives we have, or were they in some ways imposed on us? In other words, are we victims, or have we somehow chosen? And this is called Life's What You Make It. Ed is retired. Lucky Ed. He sits around and drinks his beer. He snores. There's nothing in his head. Ed is retired. Lucky Ed, his wife thinks. I'll go out instead of killing him if I stay here. Ed is retired. Lucky Ed. The TV blares. He drinks his beer. Sid is a workaholic. He never does anything but work. Mary is married to him. She married a workaholic. He often is up till 3:30. This is my life, she thinks, the jerk. Sid is a workaholic. He never does anything but work. Mary and Alice get together. Can you believe how we got stuck? Grieving in common, birds of a feather. Mary and Alice get together, talking about the end of their tether. How could we have such rotten luck? Mary and Alice get together, railing about how they got stuck. That's Mary and Alice. Life's what you make it, so the tale goes. Maybe, but though that is not quite true. Maybe this isn't what we chose. Life's what you make it, so the tale goes. Page after page of lousy prose. Why should the blame for that fall on you? Life's what you make it, so the tale goes. Ask yourself, though, could that be true? Another kind of formal poem that I've tried my hand at is called a pantoum. I don't know if you do pantoums at all.
Next week.
Good, pantoums next week. Pantoum is 4-line stanzas in which the second and the fourth line are then repeated as the first and third line of the next stanza. So you're making up new lines for the second and fourth, and then it comes all the way around again, and the first line of the poem is also the last line of the poem. It's a really neat form. One of the things I've been interested in writing poems like these and villanelles is how much freedom you do have. And I said this in the class, but when you're writing in form, it's a collaboration with the form. You discover things that you didn't even know you wanted to say. And you do have freedom, if you're lucky. In 2009, I was in New York City, and I happened to be reading the Sunday New York Times. Whole page of the Sunday Times was taken up with quotes by prisoners in Texas who were on death row, who were about to be executed. And there were about 30 of these, and every single one of them was moving. And as I read them, I thought, these are heartbreaking. And then I realized that they kind of were a found poem, and all I had to do was put them in a kind of an order. So I selected and I made them a pantoum. So you will hear repeated lines. It's called Incarceration, and I'm reading it because this was published in Stone Canoe, and this is the kind of poem that Stone Canoe was looking for, I'm happy to say. Last words, September 19th, 2009, New York Times. What follows are quotations taken from inmates' last statements in Texas. The statements were delivered before family members, relatives of victims, friends, and the press. Nothing I can say can change the past. I would like to say goodbye. I wish I could die more than once to tell you how sorry I am. I don't think the world will be a better or safer place without me. I would like to say goodbye. I am taking it like a man. I don't think the world will be a better or safer place without me. I couldn't do a life sentence. I am taking it like a man. For everybody incarcerated, keep your heads up. I couldn't do a life sentence. I can't take it back. For everybody incarcerated, keep your heads up. All my life, I have been locked up. I can't take it back. Kathy, you know I never meant to hurt you. All my life, I've been locked up. I want to tell my mom that I love her. Kathy, you know I never meant to hurt you. I can't take it back. I want to tell my mom that I love her. I wish I could die more than once to tell you how sorry I am. All my life, I have been locked up. Nothing I can say can change the past. Well, I think anybody reading those statements would have wanted to do something with them. And this is a poem about Wells, so I've stayed local except for that poem. This is called Missing the Class, and I think Dan was also doing iambic pentameter blank verse. So this is a dramatic monologue in blank verse. I told her she could take the class next fall. I didn't think about it. I didn't know her. She came around next day to plead her case, but I was adamant. What did it matter whether she took it this year or the next? All I could think about was one more student, especially at that time of the term. The class was full. I had to draw the line. Everyone loses when it gets too big, and I had let a few more in already. All I remember was that she was quiet and passive. She didn't really make a case, or even then I might have let her in. She asked me too if I'd be her advisor. I said I would, but then she didn't come back. She was a transfer, and she changed her major to psych. I only knew her as a name. And then I read the notice. She had died. It didn't say how. It said she died at home. She had dropped out. That happened in the spring. We all thought suicide, but no one knew. It's not as if we had any connection. I don't feel guilty, but you have to wonder, what if? What if I'd let her take the course? I make that snap decision all the time. What if I'd followed through as her advisor? I would have known her, we'd have met and talked, and she'd have shared her problems with the class. She would have written essays, opened up. She would have had support. That's how it happens. I know you can't go beating yourself up for things you didn't do or couldn't know, but sometimes you just have to think, what if? What if I hadn't felt harassed that morning? What if I'd paid attention, sensed some need? What if she'd just said more, or else been lucky? So the last one is a little more cheerful, and I'll close with this, and this is very local too. As many of you know, my wife Bonnie is mayor of Aurora. You didn't know that probably, Donna. So I'll dedicate this to Donna because it is a beautiful and very idyllic little town. We have our own miles. My daughter's child, Grover, and we didn't name him, is 3, going on 3, and his older sister is named Clementine. So we joke about the fact that my daughter or son-in-law have to stand at the playground and say, Grover, Clementine. Grover's very dramatic. Miles is doing this already, but Grover comes up with stuff that nobody can imagine. One time he ran into a room when there were people there and suddenly said, I am tragedy. He really did. So this is called The Princess of War. The Princess of War, the Queen of Nowhere. Our grandson, age 2, announced that my wife, who is mayor of our village, is the Princess of War, the Queen of Nowhere. No one knows where he got it. His sister, 6, professes ignorance. She swears she didn't put him up to it, and we believe her. Once he stormed into a room and declaimed, I am tragedy. My wife and I are amused and mystified, but there's a darker side to this. As mayor of a very small village, there is no way around a disturbing fact. She is the Princess of War, the Queen of Nowhere. So thank you, and thanks for...
Thanks, Bruce. I have copies of Stone Canoe if anyone's interested. They usually are $18, but $12 cheap for students. And also Dan has this amazing broadside over here too. And one thing I wanted to say before we finish up is submit work. You know, if you're a writer or an artist, tell your friends. We have some postcards too that I'll put out with our website and everything. But we are open for submissions right now. We will be until various points of July, depending on what genre you'd be submitting in. There are rolling deadlines throughout the month, and take a crack at it. So it's all online, so very easy. You don't even have to buy stamps.
Phil, did you want to
Yes.
say, unless I just missed you saying it, you have different editors for every issue?
We do. So every year, all of our editors change over. So if you've submitted in the past, try again because it's somebody different making the decisions this year. But it's always someone with some kind of tie to upstate New York that we pick. But a whole fresh crop of guest editors for this year. So, thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Phil. I guess. Let's do some food. Yeah, too. Like that. Just go.
I'm sorry, I didn't make it.
Oh, sorry, you did message me, so you know that, sorry, you didn't get it,
English are all much bigger than this.
Okay.
They were 7 by 10 instead of 6 by 9. And
Yeah.
anywhere from 50 to 150 pages of charge. And then when Bob had to pay for the last one, I think this guy, they like to screen.
Yeah, I'll see you.
This is to know if I can